feminist artists and feminist writers choose to tell their stories. And I find that really exciting.
An anthology like this, where it's women who did most of the artwork and who did most of the writing, their stories are the ones featured. It's very powerful and very refreshing, very new.
When you prioritize the motivations of a character rather than their gender, it feels less like a stereotype.
Herzlich willkommen auf dem Festival Frequenzen, Feminismen global. Obwohl der Feminismus eine vielfältige, widerständige Bewegung ist, hat sich eine Art Kanon feministischer Ästhetik entwickelt. Zum Beispiel unter Einflüssen wie der Suffragettenbewegung, der Frauenbewegung der 70er Jahre oder dem heutigen Queer-Feminismus. Aber welche feministischen Ausdrucksformen entstehen eigentlich gerade abseits dieser westlichen Normen? 10 von ihnen versammelt die Comic-Anthologie Movements and Moments. Unter anderem mit Geschichten über die anarchistischen Gewerkschafterinnen im Peru der 20er Jahre oder die erste queere Schule in Brasilien der Gegenwart. Eine von ihnen heißt Lass den Fluss fließen.
It's a book that is very rooted in feminism and feminist interpretations and reinterpretations of our histories. So the writers and artists are often young women, not all of them, but quite a large number of them, who have gone back into their histories and who have explored, researched, and then represented those histories. Now, in doing so, they're very acutely aware of the fact that the women whose stories they're telling would not necessarily define themselves as feminists. The word, the concept was foreign to them, did not exist, but that what they were doing is very firmly located inside the struggle for women's liberation, if you like, the freedom of women, the struggle against discrimination. What the writers and artists have done is to very carefully research the women, and especially if those women, they've been able to find any material on them, which has been difficult because there's so little about women, and then to make those depictions as close to those realities as possible, even if those don't fit our current definition of the liberated woman, although there isn't any such, but you know, the stereotype exists. And that is an act of responsibility and solidarity and understanding that comes from a certain kind of humility that when you approach history, because you approach it to learn and to understand and not to judge. And I think that's very evident in the way the stories are told, in the way the women who they talk about are visually imagined, and in the way that they appear on the page. Some, like the stories from Maharashtra in India, it's kind of representational but not too realistic. And then the story that you see from the Philippines, which uses a kind of almost a realistic kind of drawing to show and tell the story. And then you see the story from India, which is about a trans person, and it's completely stylized, not at all realistic in that sense of the word, you know. And then you see the story from Thailand, which is almost as if you were looking at a set of photographs. You can see the person with the skin and the cheeks and all of that over there. So I think each one, I suppose, it comes from their tradition. So the Maharashtra story is very much a story rooted in the drawing traditions of tribal people of that region. And similarly, the trans story is full of excess of color and flamboyance, which is very much the mark of a lot of the trans community and the way in which they express themselves. Is the comic a Western medium? I think in all our cultures we have really different traditions of storytelling, and with the collapsing of borders and with the spread of knowledge across the world, even though the knowledge is still spread mostly from the powerful countries, powerful nations to the less powerful ones, nonetheless you can't stop this traveling of different forms. And so what might be called a Western form can no longer be called only a Western form. Maybe it has moved into somewhere in the East or the South, and maybe the South and the East has moved somewhere into that. And you see the two together as a combination of different things. So I don't know if it matters whether it's West or East or North or South. It's just that it's such an exciting form.
Let the River Flow Free is a graphic story about the struggle of the indigenous women and men of Kalinga province in northern Philippines. They engaged in several protest actions. They tried to speak with the government. They signed and circulated petition letters to try to stop the building of the Chico River mega dam in the 1970s to the 1980s. And the dam was supposed to be funded by the World Bank. It's a brainchild of the former Filipino dictator Ferdinand Marcos. But because of the struggle and the protests of the indigenous community in northern Philippines, they were able to stop and prevent them from happening. There were elderly women who went as far as disrobe in front of soldiers because they believe that when a man sees them naked in a context like that, it will bring bad luck to the men. So they were hoping that that would stop the soldiers from entering their community. Basically, all the events that we included in the story happened in real life. We didn't want to embellish much. We wanted to be realistic so that people can read the comics as a historical document more than just a story, for example. So we were very conscious of that. We're very happy to have worked with an artist like Nina, who was able to, I think, portray the women very lovingly, very carefully, and also represent them in a strong way. In most comics that we know, the women are sexualized, objectified, etc. because it's male artists who usually do these comics. So it's nice to have female artists work on images like these, and also try to represent these characters in a feminist way. So it's refreshing, it's full of potential because there aren't very many women in comics, whether in writing comics or in drawing comics. It's a great opportunity to open a lot of conversations, not just concerning the indigenous peoples, but also on the status of women in art, in popular culture, in how women are represented, and also the access of ordinary readers to feminist materials like this.
I have already drawn comics before, but I was used to doing it in a digital format because it's faster, and I usually have to meet a deadline. But for this one, I had the opportunity to have a lot of time, so I decided to go for my favorite traditional medium, which is ink, brush and ink. And I felt like it really helped me feel connected to the story because, like the river, it's liquid and it's very unpredictable or random and natural. I feel like our protagonist, Mother Leticia, the problem that usually people think of when they hear of an indigenous elderly woman, they think of this mystical, almost magical human being. But the truth is, she experiences the same reality as most of us. So we wanted to show that she was simply a child who grew up in that area. She got married, she had children of her own, but then always the Philippine government was closing in to invade the lands, to add construction. So she had to take on the responsibility of also protector, of spokeswoman. She became a councilwoman to represent her people. So in that way, she became this leader in the eyes of her fellow villagers, but also this active menace, this activist, this annoying thorn in the side of the government. So I always made sure that even with those tropes, I saw that we showed her fear, but also her determination. I try very much not to fall into the trap of, well, I'm drawing a woman now, so I have to draw feminine features like long eyelashes or a curvy body, or I'm drawing the man now, I have to draw square shoulders. I personally like to draw human bodies, so I just draw them as naturally as I can. I think what influenced my design of the characters more is, besides their photos, what their motivation is in the story. So the people who are angry, they fill the frame, or they're always moving. The people who are stopping and listening, they are still. When you prioritize the motivations of a character rather than their gender, it feels less like stereotype. I definitely notice that when I look at the comics of my contemporaries. For example, bodies and faces are not drawn very traditionally anymore. People want to depict them in surreal ways, in not always pleasant ways, because a woman's body does not always have to be pleasant or sexually gratifying. It is something human beings occupy, and they do bodily functions in, they rebel in, they cry and shout in, and I think they want to express that in the way we draw bodies. I also noticed people will draw them with bodily hair, with noticeable folds. We have always had these features of our body, and when I draw that in my comic, I just think this is the natural body. There is nothing wrong with it. So it's interesting to hear that it's considered a new feminist way to draw comics when we are just drawing the truth.
Wenn Sie Lust haben, diese und viele weitere Comics zu lesen, finden Sie sie in der Anthologie Movements and Moments, erschienen im Jaja Verlag. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen.